Steve Stevenson, the Cleveland shooter, I don't know if you follow, shot himself after a brief pursuit in Pennsylvania. I want to get into something here because the family of the man who was murdered in cold blood actually, I think, surprised Anderson Cooper with their response to a question. And I think this ties into a larger issue. And we see this a lot online, so I want to try and handle this tactfully. I don't want to alienate people. I don't expect you to agree with everything that I'm saying or everything that they're saying. But this divide right now between new atheism and traditional Christianity, I think this is illuminating.
The thing that I would take away the most from my father is he taught us about God, how to fear God, how to love God, and how to forgive.
Yes.
And each one of us forgive the killer, the murderer.
You do.
We want to wrap our arms around him.
We
Yes.
absolutely do. We don't. I honestly can say right now that I hold no animosity
against
in my heart against this man, because I know that he's a sick individual. I know that, because of his sickness, whatever evil overtook him that caused him to do this to my dad, is not him. It wouldn't be something he would typically do. And I promise you, I could not do that if I did not know God. If I didn't know him as my God and my Savior, I could not forgive that man.
Wow. Powerful words from a family, whether you agree with him or not. I know some people are going to, well, listen, there's no more justice. The man shot himself in the head. And don't confuse what I'm about to say with being an advocacy for mercy in place of justice. That's certainly not it. But, we see this a lot. We've had Dinesh D'Souza on, and we've had Sargana. We've had pretty brilliant Christian apologists, theologians on, and we've had pretty well-known atheists on. I think this is pretty important to see, because there's this idea, first off, that religions are the cause of all wars, right? You hear that a lot. Let's do away with that. That's not even close to true. Of the 1,763 wars waged over the course of human history that we can measure, only 123 have been classified as being fought over a religious cause. Let's look at some of the modern wars in case people don't believe me. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Civil War, World War I, the Russian expansion of communism, World War II, North Korea, Vietnam. None of these were religious wars. Now, people who fought them were some people who were leaders in those wars were deeply ideological. Well, of course, you see it with people like Stalin, who was deeply atheistly ideological. It was an ideology. Atheism there was an ism. You may not like to hear it, but his atheism really was borderline religious in his practice and certainly in his imperialist attempt to expand it. So it's important to note that you can't remove the faith from the individual, but you can't also say because these individuals were religious that the wars were fought over religion. They can be fought over territory, they can be fought over resources. That's important to note. Our foundational principles, certainly in Western culture, come from Christianity. Milo talked about that. Dinesh D'Souza, you obviously look at people like C.S. Lewis, or you go back to Chesterton. These people talked about how if it's all situational ethics, if there is no foundation, that there is moral decay. I've heard compelling arguments on both sides of that. Dinesh D'Souza, for example, argues that if you look at the totality of human history, basically all technological innovation in history that we know today bloomed after the spread of Christendom. And there's a counter-argument there to be made that, well, that's also during the great empire of China. Anyways, very interesting. And very interesting, by the way, the ideologies, if you look at people who were on these sides of the war, for example, deeply Christian, look at the way the Americans treated prisoners of war compared to the Japanese or compared to the Russians. This idea I want to tackle a little bit. Atheists say, if you need a book, societies don't need religion to dictate morality. If you need a book to tell you to not kill someone from some spaghetti monster in the sky, you're crazy. You're a bad person. Okay, you know what? Let's take that. Maybe do not kill is an international language of morality. Maybe most people know that stealing is wrong. Let's say that none of those come from societal conditioning or in Western culture from conditioning through deeply Christian philosophy. Okay, let's go with that. But the idea here, the moral idea of forgiving your enemies, of showing love to your enemies, that is not something that people hold to be intrinsically moral. That is not something that a society could possibly embrace if it weren't a Christian society. Now, you may not think that's a good moral. Muslims don't. LaVeyan Satanists don't. We'll get to that. But that is a distinctly Christian moral premise. Love your enemies. That is not something that human beings do naturally on their own. So yeah, you do need a kind of a flying spaghetti monster in the sky to tell you that, you know what? Your instinct is to hate your enemies. Your instinct is to seek revenge and vengeance. Justice is right. Serve justice. I'll give you a board plan. I'll give you a blueprint how to serve justice. But do not hate and act in revenge. That's a distinctly Christian idea. It goes against human nature. Luke 6:27 says, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you." Luke 6:32 through 35 says, "If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back." This is something else that a lot of atheists say, well, religions are the cause of all wars. There's also not an equivalency between religions, because you contrast the overarching premise of love your enemies. All right, justice is mine, but love your enemies. Treat them well. As you see this family, that is an incredibly powerful. The reason that's news, the reason people are talking about it, is because it goes against every single instinct that we have as human beings. And I don't necessarily think that's wrong. You see someone shoot your father, you see someone kill your family, it's natural to want to take the issue into your own hands. And I don't necessarily think that it's immoral for that man to be punished severely. But having a book, a moral guideline say, hey, don't act on exactly what it is you want to do, that cannot occur in a society that does not have some kind of foundational principles, in our case, biblical. And let's contrast that as an equivalency with a religion like Islam. Quran verse 545, life for life, eye for eye, nose for nose, ear for ear, tooth for tooth, and wounds equal for equal. Took the eye for an eye a little bit further down the trail, that one.
Apparently we had the abridged version.
Here's one from Surah, notably verse 244. Then fight in the cause of Allah and know that Allah heareth and knoweth all things. Well, let's look at it historically. We've talked about this, Gerald.
Yeah.
Christianity, when it started spreading, right? This was a time where if you were the first martyr, Stephen, if you were a known Christian, you were killed, okay? That's when Christianity boomed. At that point. And Christianity, during that period, was spread by word of mouth. Okay? Known oppressors, you profess to be a Christian, dead. Spread by word of mouth. Now contrast that with Islam, which when it was created, there were no known direct oppressors during its greatest expansion period, always spread by the sword. Islam has only, throughout history, been spread through birth rate because these people copulate like rabbits, or at the tip of a sword. That's how Islam has spread. The main spreading of Christianity was through word of mouth. Gerald, am I incorrect?
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, that's how you can kind of validate the Christian religion as well. People don't die for a cause that isn't real, right? And so you can kind of look
the
at
early martyrs who had actually known Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then kind of going through the system there. But you're right. It's always through conquest and through just having kids into the faith.
Right.
That's the only way it grows.
The rules in Islam, Gerald knows, is convert. If you don't convert, you're killed or subjected to dimitude with all kinds of taxes, and your rights are removed from yourself. I mean, so these are your only three options. It's why there's almost no Islamic charity outside of Islam.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of Islamic bake sales going on. They're not going into Haiti at the same rates, or into Africa, helping people, helping create houses. Christian churches creating very secular missionary work, helping people just in the name of Christ. You don't see that from Islam globally, in the name of Islam, to people who aren't Muslim. It doesn't happen. Again, so let's go back down the trail. This is not something that would exist in a society without it being prescribed, the idea of loving your enemies. If you look at other religions, it is not prescribed. And if you look at the results, they are two very different pathways. And if you look at Islam, actually has much more similar with LaVeyan Satanism. Now, by the way, not all Satanists are LaVeyan Satanism. LaVeyan Satanist, it basically means it's practiced atheistic religion. They don't really believe in God. They sort of see it as mythology, but they believe that the character of Satan is more powerful because they believe that they are their own God. And so the idea of Satan rebelling against God is sort of seen as a parable for LaVeyan Satanists, and they actually like the guy who rebelled against God. Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it, not love wasted on ingrates. And that's actually pretty common throughout the history of the world. Before Christ and most places that do not involve Christ. Again, I don't care if you're an atheist, but we just need to acknowledge the different effects that different religions and worldviews have. The idea of loving your enemy didn't exist.
It's terrible that you would think that these things just come about naturally. It doesn't. Look at kids who have no social conditioning whatsoever are selfish. They're absolutely out for their own needs, and basically that's humanism. And so you're telling the world that there is no God, you're your own God, do what you want. Well, we've seen what happens in cultures when you do what you want. Bad people come to power and millions of people die every single time.
Right. Yeah, and of course, obviously, some people will argue, let's preempt this, that some people have used the mantle of Christianity to manipulate and become bad people in power and kill lots of people. That has happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, if you go back to the founder of the feast, let's go back to Christ, contrast that with Muhammad, contrast that with the ancient Egyptian religions, contrast that with Levian Satanism. It's not the same. And that's why these kinds of reports are powerful. Why is it news? Because you go, oh my gosh, would I want to hug someone who murdered my father? You know what? It's incredibly difficult to do. And that's the concept through Christianity of dying to flesh. If you're an atheist, hopefully you're learning, being educated here, just as to what Christians believe. Dying to yourself every day. If you hear that term, it's the meaning of actually not giving in to your basic, even carnal instincts. And you see that here, and that is not something that you will find in any society just through happenstance. Hey, if you like this clip, it's taken from the full daily show, available exclusively at louderwithcrowder.com/mugclub. That's for Mug Club members because we can't be dependent here on the Google, YouTube overlords. Subscribe there. We have a daily show, full hour every day. If you don't, well, there's no saving you.